3 months before my wedding, my fiancé brought another woman into our home. I couldn't believe my own ears. As I stood in the foyer, dragging my suitcase, I saw an unfamiliar pair of Chanel Camellia sandals next to the shoe rack. A size 8.5. Not my size. Mr. Evans, our housekeeper, came to take my suitcase. His expression was as if he'd just swallowed a fly. "Welcome home, ma'am." Ma'am, not Miss Catherine. They used to call me Miss Catherine, but now, they didn't even use my name. I said nothing, swapping my heels for a pair of slippers and heading upstairs. The sound of my suitcase wheels rolling across the hardwood floor echoed through the cavernous house, loud as if I were dragging a body. The door to the master bedroom was slightly ajar. A woman's laughter spilled from the gap, a cloying, deliberately sweet sound. "Oh, Jonathan, this negligee from La Perla. I picked it out just for you. I thought the champagne gold would be a perfect match for your bedsheets." I didn't push the door open. I peered through the crack. Lena Hayes stood beside the bed in a camisole-style negligee, a silk robe held in front of her. Her suitcase was splayed open on the carpet, its contents designer clothes, high-end skincare products scattered across the floor as if she were marking her territory. That was the bed I had slept in for 2 years. The sheets were new. Jonathan Pierce had bought them last month. He'd said a change of color might change the mood. Now I understood what he meant. He wasn't changing the mood, he was changing the person. Jonathan was leaning against the headboard, smoking. His bathrobe was loosely tied, his chest exposed. "If you like it, you can keep it," he said, his voice as indifferent as if he were commenting on the weather. "Then can I use this closet, too?" Lena opened the door to the walk-in closet and glanced back at him, her eyes sparkling. "Oh, but..." She bit her lower lip, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There are still someone else's things in here." Jonathan simply flicked the ash from his cigarette, saying nothing. Lena returned to the bedside, sitting down and placing a hand on his knee. "Jonathan, I don't want Catherine to think I've stolen her place. Maybe I should just stay in the guest room." A 3-second silence. Jonathan stubbed out his cigarette in the ashtray on the nightstand. "You're staying here," he said. "Don't worry about it." Lena threw herself into his arms, clinging to him like a vine. "Oh, Jonathan, you're so good to me." I stood outside the door, silent. My hand, gripping the handle of my suitcase, had turned white from the pressure. My nails dug into my palm, the pain a sharp reminder that my body could still feel. When I turned, I saw my reflection in the full-length mirror at the end of the hall. I was in a tailored suit and high heels, my hair pulled back without a single stray strand. Today, I had flown 4 hours to close a major deal for Pierce Industries. I'd spent the entire afternoon in a conference room, arguing with the other party, my lunch a sandwich eaten in the back of a car. But I had secured the contract. Pierce Industries had won the exclusive development rights for the Southwood district. I had rushed back, eager to share the good news with him. It turned out he had other news waiting for me. I dragged my suitcase back down the stairs, each step surprisingly steady. Mr. Evans was still standing in the foyer. "Ma'am, which room should I take your luggage to?" he asked. Which room, not your room. Even he understood the master bedroom was no longer my place. "The guest room, please," I said. Mr. Evans took the suitcase, his gaze averted, refusing to meet my eyes. The curtains in the guest room were drawn, the air slightly musty. I sat on the bed, turning my phone on and off, on and off. The time on the screen changed from 9:10 p.m. to 9:32 p.m. I could hear movement from the floor above Lena, probably unpacking her things. I pictured her colorful bottles and jars filling the vanity in the master bedroom. I made a call. After a long series of rings, the other end picked up without a word. "It's me," I said. "I know." Alexander Sterling's voice was deep, like tea that had steeped overnight. "Is that offer still valid?" A moment of silence on the line. "Are you serious?" "I am." "City Hall, tomorrow, 9 a.m. "Got it." After hanging up, I stood and pulled open the guest room curtains. The night outside was dense, like ink that would never dissolve. Lights in the mansion's garden illuminated the lawn, where tulips Jonathan had specially imported from Holland were planted. I was the one who had chosen the varietals. He hadn't changed the flowers, he had changed me first. My phone buzzed again. It was a social media notification from Lena Hayes. She had posted a selfie, leaning against the headboard of the master bed, wearing that champagne gold negligee. The caption was just 2 words, "My place." The location tag read, "The Pierce Estate, Greenwich." She must have forgotten to block me. Or perhaps it wasn't an oversight, but a deliberate act. I liked the post. It was deleted almost immediately. She must have finally remembered the existence of privacy settings. But I had already saved the screenshot. I filed it in a specific folder on my phone, one that also contained a photo of a receipt for a Cartier bracelet Jonathan had bought her, hotel booking confirmations, and a log of his schedule, secretly sent by his secretary, cross-referenced with their meetings. I had never confronted him. Not because I was tolerant, but because I was waiting for my feelings to die completely. Or for a more devastating way to end things. Now, I had both. Chapter 2, Not an Inch to Give. The next morning at 6, I finished my makeup and changed into a red dress. Not a bright, flashy red, but a deep, blood red. At 7 o'clock sharp, I knocked on the door of the master bedroom. It was Lena who answered, wearing one of Jonathan's dress shirts, her thighs exposed. The moment she saw me, a flash of triumph lit her eyes. "Catherine? What is it, so early? I need to speak with Jonathan." He came to the door, knotting his tie. When he saw me, his hands froze. "What is it?" His tone was completely different from how he spoke to Lena. Casual with her, businesslike with me. I used to think it was a sign of trust. Now I knew it was indifference. "The company needs me to go to Chicago on business. For about a week," I said, my voice as flat as if I were reading a report. Jonathan frowned. "How long?" "A week. Is it a project that takes that long?" I didn't answer his question. Instead, I smiled. "I didn't realize you cared." He was speechless. Lena immediately wrapped her arm around his. "Jonathan, don't ask so many questions. Catherine has to go for work. Business is busy, you know." She turned to me with a sweet smile. "Don't worry about a thing, Catherine. I'll take good care of the house, and Jonathan while you're gone." "The house?" She called it the house. I stared at her for 3 seconds, then laughed. "All right, then. I'll leave him in your hands." As I turned to leave, Jonathan suddenly called out, "Catherine." I stopped, but didn't turn around. He was silent for 2 seconds, then said just one thing. "Be safe." "I will." Walking down the stairs, I counted in my head. Since I entered the room, he had spoken 5 complete sentences to me. "What is it? How long? Is it a project that takes that long? I didn't realize you cared. Be safe." Not a single word asking me to stay. Not a single word asking if something was wrong. Not a single word asking how I felt. Excellent. Truly excellent. Jonathan Pierce. If you're going to be this thorough, then so will I. I walked out the main gate of the estate. The morning sun was blinding. My phone lit up with a text from Alexander Sterling. Just 2 words, "I'm here." I looked back at the house I had lived in for 2 years. The curtains of the master bedroom were open, and Lena was standing at the window. She held a coffee cup and waved it at me. I raised my hand in return. It wasn't a wave to her, but a farewell. A farewell to every person and everything in that house that had made me miserable. Then I opened the car door and left the Pierce estate without a backward glance. After we had driven for a while, I made a call. "Mr. Miller, I need you to draw up a prenuptial agreement. I need it today. Miss Beckwith, your wedding to Mr. Pierce is still 3 months away." "It's not needed anymore," I said, my voice light, cutting him off as if I were commenting on the fine weather. "The agreement isn't for me and Jonathan." The other end of the line went silent. "It's for me and someone else." I hadn't left yet. At least, not that morning. After Jonathan went to the office, only Lena and I remained in the mansion. I was in the guest room organizing my things when she knocked and came in, holding a glass of freshly squeezed orange juice. "Catherine, here's some juice. I made it myself." She was wearing my slippers. The fluffy ones I'd bought at Bloomingdale's last month, the cream-colored pair with bunny ears. Jonathan had laughed at the time, asking why a woman in her mid-20s would wear something so childish. Now, I saw those bunny ears crushed beneath Lena's feet. There was a small coffee stain on the plush fabric. "Thank you." I took the juice and placed it on the nightstand, with no intention of drinking it. Lena surveyed the guest room, her fingers tracing the curtains, the dresser, the closet doors, as if inspecting her domain. "This room doesn't get much light, does it?" she said, her tone a blend of condescending pity and feigned kindness. "Isn't it hard for you to live here, Catherine? I can ask Jonathan to clear out the sunroom on the 3rd floor for you." "That's all right." "You're right," she smiled. "You're going on a business trip. You're only staying here for 1 more night." I didn't reply, just opened my suitcase and began folding clothes. She showed no signs of leaving. Instead, she perched on the edge of the bed. "Catherine, I've actually been meaning to thank you." My hands, folding a silk blouse, paused for a fraction of a second. "Thank you for taking care of Jonathan these past 2 years," she said, her voice gentle, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "From now on, you can leave things like this to me. You can finally relax." I finished folding the blouse and placed it in the luggage compartment. My movements were slow, smoothing out every last wrinkle before I let go. "How long have you known Jonathan?" Lena seemed surprised by the question. She faltered for a moment before answering. "About 6 months, I think." 6 months. Jonathan had proposed to me 5 months ago. He had booked out an entire riverside restaurant. As fireworks exploded overhead, he got down on one knee, held up a ring, and said, "Catherine, marry me." The fireworks were beautiful. Looking back now, perhaps they weren't just for me. "Did you know he had a fiancée?" I asked. Lena looked down, fiddling with her nails. They were adorned with crushed diamonds that sparkled under the light. "Yes, I knew." She looked up, her gaze surprisingly bold. "But Jonathan told me there was no love left between you. He said being with you was exhausting. That you were too competitive, always needing things to be black and white. You were never vulnerable, never let him take care of you." As she spoke, her brow furrowed in sympathy. "He also said being with you felt like a business transaction. He said being with me, that felt like a real relationship." I stopped what I was doing. Not because I was sad, but because Jonathan had never once said any of this to me. What he wanted, what he didn't, what he liked, what he disliked, he never said a word. Whenever I asked, he would just say, "Whatever you think is best, is fine with me." I had thought it was trust. It turned out to be indifference. "Are you done?" I looked at Lena. My expression must have made her uncomfortable. Her smile stiffened for a moment before she reverted to her innocent demeanor. "Catherine, don't be angry. I didn't mean to upset you. It's just that Jonathan has made his decision, and I think you should learn to let go. You can't force feelings." She stood up from the bed, adjusting the shirt of his she was wearing. "Oh, by the way, did you know? Jonathan is taking me to pick out a wedding dress this weekend. That wedding in 3 months. The bride is going to be me now." I finally laughed. Not a sneer, but a genuine, amused laugh. "Congratulations, then." Lena tilted her head, likely surprised by my straightforwardness. "You're really not angry, Catherine?" "Why should I be?" I placed the last piece of clothing into my suitcase and zipped it shut. I stood up and looked at her. "You picked up something I was throwing away. I should be thanking you." Lena's face changed. "What did you say?" I said. I gripped the handle of my suitcase. "I don't want a man named Jonathan Pierce anymore. If you want him, take him. You don't need to report back to me." Tears welled up in Lena's eyes in an instant. "Catherine Beckwith, how can you say that? Do you know what an amazing man Jonathan is? Do you know how many women in this world want to marry him? Just because you can't hold on to your own man, you don't have to be such a sore loser." She was, admittedly, beautiful when she cried. Fat tears rolled down her cheeks, the tip of her nose turned red, and her lips trembled slightly. I could understand why Jonathan fell for this act. "Are you done crying?" I leaned against the closet, arms crossed, watching her. Lena sniffled. "If you're done, please get out. I'd like to rest." She opened her mouth, as if to say something more, but my expression seemed to make her swallow her words. She turned and left the guest room. At the doorway, she glanced back at me one last time. The tears on her face hadn't dried, but a smirk played on her lips. "Catherine Beckwith, it's no use pretending to be calm," she said. "Your heart is bleeding. I can tell." The door closed. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked down at my hands. The ring was still on my finger, the 3-carat, emerald-cut diamond Jonathan had given me when he proposed. He had boasted about going to Antwerp himself to select the stone and having the best craftsman set it. Wearing it had left a faint indentation on my ring finger. I took off the ring and placed it on the nightstand. The diamond caught the light, casting a cold, white gleam. It looked like a single frozen tear. My phone buzzed. A text from Alexander Sterling. "Packed?" I replied with one word. "Yes." "Should I send a car?" "No, I'll get there myself." "All right. Don't be late tomorrow." 9 a.m. Okay, the conversation was over. My exchanges with Alexander Sterling were always like this, concise, without a single wasted word. He was my classmate from grad school and the heir to Sterling Holdings. His family's net worth was more than 10 times that of the Pierces. And more importantly, he owed me a huge favor. A very, very big one. He came home at 8 that evening. I was eating dinner in the dining room. Mr. Evans had set a separate table for me, and the dishes were all cooked to my taste. Having worked in this house for 10 years, he was probably the only one who remembered my preferences. Jonathan and Lena were eating in the living room. A single sliding door separated us, so I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could occasionally hear laughter. Halfway through my meal, the sliding door opened. Jonathan walked in, holding a bottle of red wine. "Catherine, Lena said you're leaving on business tomorrow, so we opened this bottle to see you off." To see me off. After he had given the master bedroom we had shared for 2 years to another woman, he wanted to see me off. I put down my chopsticks and looked up at him. "How nice." Jonathan poured wine into 2 glasses, handing one to me and keeping the other. He lightly touched his glass to mine, making a clear, clinking sound. "Be safe." The same words as this morning. I took a sip of the wine. It tasted bitter. "Jonathan." "Yes? Is there anything you want to say to me?" He held his wine glass, stared at my face for a few seconds, then looked away. "No." I nodded. "Good. I don't have anything to say to you, either." He turned and left. As the sliding door closed, I saw Lena standing on the other side, clinging to his arm, her whole body pressed against his. I downed the rest of the wine in my glass, stood up, and took my empty dishes to the kitchen. Mr. Evans was washing dishes. Seeing me come in, he quickly tried to take the plates from my hands. "Ma'am, please leave them. I'll take care of it. Mr. Evans." I placed the dishes in the sink and leaned against the counter. "Thank you for everything these past 2 years." Mr. Evans' hands stopped under the running faucet. The water kept flowing. "Ma'am, I'm leaving tomorrow, and I won't be coming back. Please take care of yourself." Mr. Evans looked down, his shoulders trembling slightly. "Ma'am, it must have been so hard for you." I smiled and patted his shoulder. "It's not hard at all." When I left the kitchen, the 2 in the living room were no longer at the dining table. I could hear footsteps and a woman's sweet laughter coming from the staircase, moving up, step by step, and fading into the distance. I returned to the guest room. The moment I closed the door, I leaned my back against it and shut my eyes. 3 seconds. Just 3 seconds. Then I opened them and began to pack the last of my things. On the nightstand, the diamond ring sat where I had left it. Its light cast a small, bright spot on the wood, like a teardrop that was about to fall, but never did. I decided to leave it there. Chapter 3. The Escape. At 2 in the morning, the entire mansion was silent. Only the dim footlights in the hallway cast a faint glow, like a tunnel leading to an exit. I left the guest room with my suitcase, trying to muffle the sound of the wheels on the floor. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Each step in sync with the beat of my own heart. As I passed the master bedroom, I paused for a moment. A sliver of light escaped from under the door. Lena probably couldn't sleep in complete darkness. I could hear the sound of their steady breathing. I looked away and continued forward. As I walked down the stairs, my phone lit up. It was a picture from Alexander Sterling. The photo showed a single key resting on a dark marble surface. The keychain was a silver plate engraved with a single word. Sterling. A second message arrived immediately. "The apartment is ready. A 3,500 square foot penthouse in Midtown. The code is your birthday." I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure of what to reply. He must have sensed my hesitation. A third message came through. "This isn't charity. When you helped me, you didn't ask if I needed it." I sent back a single word. "Okay." When I reached the foyer, I saw a pair of men's leather shoes next to the Chanel Camellia sandals on the shoe rack. Jonathan's shoes. They were pointed outward, with slight creases from being worn today. I opened the bottom drawer of the shoe cabinet and took out a car key. The white Porsche Panamera in the garage was my car. I had bought it myself. The loan, the insurance, the maintenance all paid for with my own money. When Jonathan had offered to buy me a car, I had refused. Only what you buy for yourself is truly yours. Looking back, perhaps even then, we were no longer people walking the same path. He wanted a woman who depended on him. I, on the other hand, had always been used to standing on my own 2 feet. The garage door slowly rolled up. The car's headlights illuminated the black Maybach parked in front of it. That was Jonathan's car. The license plate ended in 3/8. I backed the Porsche out of the garage, and as I passed the Maybach, I rolled down my window and glanced at the license plate. Then I stepped on the gas and drove out of the estate gates. In the rearview mirror, the house I had lived in for 2 years grew smaller and smaller, eventually becoming a blurry point of light that dissolved into the midnight darkness. My phone was connected to the car's Bluetooth. A call came in from Alexander Sterling. You're out? Yes. Did you cry? I was at a loss for words for a moment, then laughed. No. Good. His voice was deep, with a slight rasp from having just woken up. He isn't worth it. Those 4 words warmed my heart more than any declaration of love Jonathan had ever made in the past 2 years. Alexander. Yes. After we register tomorrow, can I live in that apartment you mentioned? The other end of the line was silent for a moment, and then he chuckled. The keys are already yours. At 3:40 a.m., I parked in front of a high-rise in the city. This was my own home. Jonathan didn't know about this place. I had bought it 2 years ago. Using my own savings for the down payment, with the mortgage deducted from my salary account. It wasn't that I was wary of him, I just believed a woman should always leave herself a way out. Now, that escape route had become my only path forward. I took the elevator to the 20th floor. I used my fingerprint to unlock the door. The 650 square foot studio apartment, the gray curtains, the deep green sofa I had chosen myself, all the furniture was covered in dust sheets. Like presents waiting to be unwrapped. I pulled the sheet off the sofa and sat down. I opened the photo album on my phone. The first picture was taken the day Jonathan proposed. Fireworks exploded overhead as he knelt on one knee, holding up the ring. I stood before him, hands covering my mouth, eyes filled with tears. A waiter at the restaurant had taken the photo. The angle and lighting were perfect, like a movie poster. The second photo was from the day we moved into the mansion. He stood in the doorway, holding out a hand to me. Welcome home. The third was from his birthday. I had cooked a feast for him. I had secretly snapped a picture as he blew out the candles. The candlelight reflected on his face, a warm, beautiful yellow. I flipped through the photos, one by one. When I reached the last one, my finger lingered on the screen. The last photo was from today. It showed the crack of the master bedroom door. Lena in her champagne gold negligee, sitting by the bed, and Jonathan leaning against the headboard, smoking. I hadn't taken a picture of that scene, but my eyes had remembered it. I selected all the photos in the album and hit the delete button. A dialog box popped up. Delete 321 photos? Yes. The screen flickered for a moment, and the album was empty. Next, I opened my contacts and found Jonathan Pierce's name. His profile picture was a side profile I had taken. One weekend afternoon, as light streamed through the window, he was on the sofa reading documents. The line of his profile was beautiful. I tapped it and deleted the contact. The system displayed another dialog box. Delete contact. Jonathan Pierce? Yes. I deleted his social media, unfollowed his blog, removed him as a friend on payment apps, deleted his shipping address from shopping apps, and erased his favorite orders from delivery apps. I spent 40 minutes erasing Jonathan Pierce from every corner of my phone, like rubbing out a misspelled word with an eraser. At 5 a.m., I leaned back on the sofa and closed my eyes. When I opened them again, it was already light outside. I washed my face, redid my makeup, and changed my clothes. Not the deep red dress from yesterday, but a white shirt and black trousers, a crisp, professional outfit, as if I were going to sign an important contract. Before leaving, I looked at myself in the full-length mirror in the entryway. 26 years old. My skin was in good condition. No bloodshot eyes. The corners of my mouth could still form a perfect arc. City Hall opened at 9. I arrived 20 minutes early. A few couples were already lined up at the entrance, some holding hands, others whispering to each other. The women held bouquets, the men wore suits. They all had the same expression, a mixture of anticipation and nervousness about the future. I stood at the end of the line. No flowers in my hand, no one by my side. My phone rang. It was Jonathan Pierce. I answered, but didn't speak first. Catherine, where are you? His voice was still thick with sleep. Mr. Evans said you left in the middle of the night. Business trip, I said. A business trip that requires you to leave in the middle of the night? I have a flight to catch. The other end went silent for a moment. Then, in the background, I heard Lena's voice, sweet and cloying, asking, Jonathan, who is it? It's nothing. Go back to sleep. Jonathan's voice became muffled, probably because he had covered the microphone with his hand. Then he was back on the line with me. Catherine, did you go into the master bedroom? No. Then who put the ring on the nightstand? I leaned against a pillar at the entrance of City Hall and looked up at the sky. It was a beautiful day. The cloudless blue sky was perfect for getting married. I did. Jonathan's voice rose an octave. You took off the ring? Yes. Catherine Beckwith. It doesn't mean anything, I said. The ring was just too tight, it was uncomfortable. I paid $300,000 for that ring. I know, I cut him off. That's why I left it for your next fiancé. You don't have to thank me. I heard a dull thud on the other end, as if something had been slammed onto a hard surface. Catherine Beckwith, you get back here right now. I can't. I'm about to get married. Don't be ridiculous. I hung up. Then I turned off my phone. At 9 o'clock sharp, a black Rolls-Royce pulled up in front of City Hall. The door opened, and Alexander Sterling got out. He was wearing a dark gray suit, no tie, with the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone, revealing his collarbone. His hair wasn't perfectly styled, a few strands fell across his forehead, making him look softer than usual. He walked up to me and glanced at me. Did I keep you waiting? 20 minutes. There was traffic. When he said those 2 words, his expression was a little unnatural, as if someone unaccustomed to making excuses was forcing one out. I couldn't help but laugh. Alexander, you look kind of cute when you're stuck in traffic. He glanced at me but said nothing. His ears were red. Let's go. He gestured with his chin toward the entrance of City Hall. Wait. I took 2 documents out of my bag. Sign this before we go in. Alexander took them, flipped through a few pages, and raised an eyebrow. A prenuptial agreement? Yes. Separate property, separate debts. Any assets under our individual names after marriage will belong to us individually. If we divorce, we're not getting a divorce. I looked up at him. He closed the document and handed it back to me. I'm not signing this. Why not? Because it's not necessary. He looked into my eyes. His voice wasn't heavy, but each word was like a nail driven into stone. I, Alexander Sterling, do not get married with the intention of getting divorced. The light from the side cast his face in half light, half shadow. I suddenly thought, it really is a beautiful day. You're going to sign it, I said. This isn't about trust. It's about rules. Alexander stared at me for 3 seconds, then took a fountain pen from the inner pocket of his suit. He opened the last page of the agreement and signed his name on the signature line. His handwriting was forceful, the ink almost bleeding through to the other side. He handed the agreement to me. Your turn. I signed Catherine Beckwith. Then he folded the agreement and put it in his pocket. I'll keep this. We can burn it together on our golden anniversary. I couldn't help but laugh. Our golden anniversary? You'll be in your 70s by then. What? He turned to look at me. You think I'll be an old man? No, I stopped smiling and looked at him seriously. I'm just worried you'll regret it by then. Alexander didn't answer. He pushed open the glass door of City Hall and held it for me to enter first. As the door closed behind me, I heard him murmur something. His voice was very low, almost lost in the din of the lobby. It won't be me who has regrets. Chapter 4. A 10-minute marriage. The lobby of City Hall was crowded with people in line. Alexander didn't join the queue. He led me directly to a side door with a plaque that read, Special Services. A uniformed clerk stood at the door, and upon seeing Alexander, immediately straightened up. Mr. Sterling, this way, please. Everything is ready. I glanced back at Alexander. You arranged this beforehand? Yes. When? Yesterday, after you called. The room was small, but elegantly appointed. A red calligraphy character for joy hung on the wall, and the table was covered with a white lace cloth. A vase of white roses sat on the table, and the sunlight streaming through the window bathed the room in a warm yellow glow. A middle-aged woman with glasses sat behind the table, with 2 blank marriage certificates in front of her. Mr. Sterling, Miss Beckwith, please have a seat. After we sat down, she took a red velvet tray from a drawer. On it were 2 simple wedding bands. Mr. Sterling brought these yesterday. Please try them on for size. I picked one up. It was a slender platinum band, engraved with 2 words. One side said Sterling, the other, Beckwith. No flowery declarations of love, just 2 surnames, coming together like 2 pieces of a puzzle. Does it fit? Alexander asked. I slipped the ring onto my ring finger. It was a perfect fit. How did you know my size? He didn't answer, just put on his own ring. Then he held out his hand to me, palm up. I placed my hand in his. His fingers closed around mine, enveloping my entire hand. His palm was dry and warm, his grip not tight, but very steady. The clerk smiled. Please fill out these forms first. The forms were simple: name, gender, date of birth, ID number, marital status. When I got to the marital status field, my pen paused for a moment. First marriage. At 26, my first marriage. 3 months ago, I was preparing for a different wedding. Now, I was here, filling out a marriage certificate with another man. Life was truly unpredictable. After we finished, the clerk took the 2 certificates, affixed our photos, and stamped them. The sound of the stamp was a crisp, clean thump. Congratulations. You are now legally husband and wife. Alexander took the 2 marriage certificates, glanced at them, and handed one to me. Keep this safe. I took it and opened it. In the photo, I was wearing a white shirt, and he was in a dark gray suit. Neither of us was smiling broadly, just a slight lift at the corners of our mouths. But for some reason, this photo looked more comfortable than any picture I had ever taken with Jonathan. As we left the room, I took out my phone to check the time. 9:10 a.m. Exactly 10 minutes had passed since we entered. The couples in the lobby were still waiting, some yawning on the benches, others playing on their phones, a few trying to quiet restless children. No one noticed us emerge from the special services room. No one knew that the woman in the white shirt had just completed a marriage in 10 minutes. Standing on the steps of City Hall, I took a deep breath. I could smell the scent of sweet osmanthus in the air. I wondered where it was coming from. Are you hungry? Alexander stood beside me, his hands in his trouser pockets. His voice was as casual as if he were asking about the weather. A little. What do you want to eat? Breakfast at a little cafe in the village. He looked down at me, a slight twitch at the corner of his mouth. He probably found my answer surprising, expecting me to say afternoon tea or some fancy brunch. That's what I'm in the mood for today, I said. He nodded, opened the car door for me, then got into the driver's seat. He started the engine and turned into a small side street. Less than 5 minutes later, he parked in front of an unassuming breakfast spot. The place was tiny, with a few folding tables set up outside, all occupied by people eating. The savory smell of smoked salmon filled the alley. Alexander took off his suit jacket, draped it over the back of a chair, and rolled up his sleeves. He called out to the owner, 2 orders of the salmon scramble. The owner turned, recognized Alexander, and his eyes widened in surprise. Mr. Sterling. What brings you here today? Came to get some breakfast. He pulled out a chair for me. The owner's gaze flickered over my face, then he broke into a wide grin. Of course, of course. Have a seat. Coming right up. The breakfast arrived. Fluffy scrambled eggs with lox, a side of perfectly toasted rye bread, and a steaming cup of coffee. I savored the simple meal. Alexander. Yes? You said you owed me a favor. Does this count as repayment? He paused, a piece of egg on his fork. No. Then what is this? He placed the egg from his fork onto my plate. That favor is something I'll spend a lifetime repaying. He paused for a moment. This is something I wanted to do. I didn't ask any more questions, just quietly took a sip of my coffee. The balance was perfect. After breakfast, Alexander drove me to the 3,500 square foot penthouse. The code is your birthday. Month and day, 6 digits. He handed me the key. Everything inside is taken care of. If you need anything, just tell the building manager. You're not staying here? He glanced at me. Do you want me to stay here? I couldn't answer that question. Alexander pressed the key into my hand, his fingers lightly brushing my palm. There's no rush. You live here first. When you're ready, let me know. He turned and got into his car. The Rolls-Royce's engine purred to life and pulled away from the building. I stood there, holding the key. The silver plate on the keychain glinted in the sun, engraved with the word Sterling. I took the elevator to the 28th floor. I entered the code. The lock clicked open. The entryway lights turned on automatically, casting a warm yellow glow down the hallway. I took off my shoes and walked barefoot on the floor, step by step, deeper into the apartment. The living room had floor-to-ceiling windows. The curtains were a gray linen, and a breeze from a half-open window made them sway gently. The sofa was a deep blue velvet, and a pot of Phalaenopsis orchids sat on the coffee table. The petals were a pale purple, still dotted with dew. A white envelope lay on the dining table. I opened it. Inside was a black bank card and a note. The note had only one sentence, written in Alexander's hand. Password is the same as the door. Buy whatever you want. Don't hold back. I folded the note and put it back in the envelope, along with the bank card. I went into the bedroom. The bed was enormous, with white linens. A neatly folded set of silk pajamas lay on the pillow. I picked them up, the tag had my size on it. A picture frame sat on the nightstand. It held a photo of me and Alexander. It was from our graduate school gala 3 years ago. I was in an evening gown, drinking wine by the window. He was walking past behind me, and a photographer had happened to capture us both in the frame. In the photo, I wasn't looking at the camera. He wasn't looking at the camera, either. We were looking in different directions, but we were standing very close. So close that the hem of my dress was touching his trousers. When had he kept this picture? I put the frame down, walked to the window, and opened the curtains. The view from the 28th floor was expansive, overlooking half the city. The sunlight streamed in, falling on the simple band on my ring finger. The inside was engraved with the word Beckwith. I twisted the ring slightly, tracing the letters with my thumb. Just then, a phone rang. Not my phone, but a burner phone I kept in my purse. It had only one number saved in it. Jonathan's secretary. I answered the call. Miss Beckwith, Mr. Pierce is in a state. He had me check your flight records, but none of the airlines have a purchase under your name. I see. He also had me check hotel reservations, but there was nothing there either. I say. Mrs. Beckwith. The secretary's voice dropped even lower. Mr. Pierce is in his office, breaking things, he said. He said if you don't come back, he'll what? I leaned against the window, gazing at the city skyline. He said he'll throw out everything you left at the mansion. I chuckled softly. Tell him he can throw out whatever he wants. But, your important things. The only things that belong to me are the ones I took with me, I said. Everything I left behind is something I no longer want. After hanging up, I turned off the burner phone as well. I lay down on the huge bed and closed my eyes. The sheets had a very faint scent of cedarwood. It might have been the laundry detergent. Or it might have been Alexander's scent. I buried my face in the pillow and took a deep breath. My heartbeat was slow and steady. Not like at the Pierce estate, where my heart would race every time I heard a sound from the master bedroom upstairs, like a bird trapped in a cage. It was different now. The cage was open, and the bird had flown away. Chapter 5. He told me everything over the phone, his voice a hushed whisper, as if he were describing a disaster he had witnessed firsthand. On the first day, Jonathan didn't look for me. He went to work as usual, attended meetings, and for lunch, ate a home-cooked lunch Lena had brought him. Lena took a dozen selfies in the elevator of the Pierce Industries building, and posted all of them on social media. The captions varied from bringing my man his lunch to a day in the life of a loving partner. That night, he took her to a French restaurant, a 3-Michelin star place he had once promised to take me to. I had tried to get a reservation there 3 times and failed. He had gotten one with a single phone call. Lena posted 9 photos of the red wine, the steak, the dessert, a shot of Jonathan's hands cutting his steak, and a picture of the city lights outside. The caption read, "Every day is an anniversary when you're with your soulmate." According to Mr. Evans, Jonathan drank a lot that night. Lena was the one who helped him upstairs when they got home. As they passed the guest room, he paused for a moment. "Did Catherine call today?" "No, she didn't," Lena replied. Jonathan stared at the closed guest room door for a few seconds, then let Lena lead him up to the second floor. On the second day, Jonathan started looking for me. He called my cell, but it was turned off. He sent me a message on social media, but it was met with a red exclamation mark indicating I had blocked him. He ordered his secretary to track my movements. The secretary checked every airline and hotel system but found no records under my name. He started to get agitated. Mr. Evans said he paced back and forth in the living room, clutching his phone, dialing my number over and over again. Each time, he was met with the same robotic female voice. "The number you have dialed is currently switched off." Lena came downstairs in a silk slip dress, holding a glass of milk. "Jonathan, stop calling. She's a grown woman, she's not going to disappear. She probably just wants some time alone." Jonathan turned to look at her. "Shut up." The glass of milk in Lena's hand trembled, almost spilling. "Jonathan," I said, "shut up." It was the first time Jonathan had spoken to Lena so harshly. "Mr. Evans said," Lena's face looked as if she'd been slapped. But she recovered quickly. She put down the glass of milk, walked over to Jonathan, and linked her arm through his, her voice as sweet as melted cream. "I'm sorry. I'm just worried about Catherine. What if something happens to her out there all alone?" Jonathan didn't shake her off, but he didn't look at her either. He stared at the red exclamation mark on his phone screen, his thumb typing and deleting and typing messages. Finally, he threw the phone onto the sofa. "Get me the contact information for all her friends. Call every single one of them." The secretary called all my friends. The replies were all more or less the same. "Catherine? Isn't she with you? I don't know. I haven't heard from her recently. She'll be back after her business trip. No one knew where I was. Because I hadn't told anyone. On the third day, Jonathan Pierce lost his mind. He had his secretary pull the security footage from the mansion. The video showed me at 2 a.m., pulling my suitcase out of the guest room. I paused for a moment as I passed the master bedroom, then continued down the stairs without looking back. The foyer light flashed on, then off. The garage door slowly rolled up, and the white Porsche drove out of the gate. Its taillights streaked 2 red lines into the night, growing more distant until they finally disappeared from the edge of the screen. Jonathan watched this footage over and over again. Mr. Evans said he sat in front of his secretary's laptop, replaying it, searching for some clue. He saw the 1-second pause I took in front of the master bedroom. He saw my straight back as I walked down the stairs. He saw me open the shoe cabinet drawer and take out the car key. He saw my profile, reflected for a split second in the rearview mirror as the Porsche left the gate. No tears, no hesitation, no looking back. Then he had people search the guest room. The closet was empty. The dresser was empty. The nightstand was empty, except for a glass with a little water left in it. The 3-carat diamond ring was on the nightstand in the master bedroom. The diamond faced up, catching the light, casting a cold, white gleam. Underneath the ring was a small note. It had only 3 words printed on it. You're not wanted. It wasn't handwritten. I had deliberately used a printer. Handwriting carries emotion. Printed words are as cold as a contract. Jonathan crumpled the note, then smoothed it out, then crumpled it again. The paper became a wrinkled ball in his hand. When he smoothed it out again, the words were already smudged and blurred by the sweat of his palm. Find her. He slammed the note on the table, his voice hoarse, like sand scraping against metal. Turn this whole city upside down if you have to, but find her. The secretary asked, Mr. Pierce, should we file a police report? Jonathan was silent for a long time. Report what? He said, his voice suddenly low. She's not missing. She left. He had finally said it. She left. Not kidnapped, not in an accident, not missing. She had simply packed her bags, taken off her ring, and at 2 a.m, driven away from his life. Cleanly and completely. At that moment, I was in Alexander Sterling's 3,500 square foot penthouse, sitting on the deep blue velvet sofa. A cup of hot tea was at my feet, and a document was in my hands. Alexander's secretary had brought it over. The cover read, Pierce Industries Southwood Project Analysis Report. I opened the first page. It was filled with dense data and charts, all pointing to the same conclusion. Pierce Industries' investment in the Southwood district carried a massive risk. It was the same land I had just secured the contract for. The same land Jonathan thought was a huge victory. He didn't know that a planned subway line ran directly underneath it. According to the city's urban plan, the subway station entrance would occupy 1/3 of the project's land. Once the plan was made public, Pierce Industries' entire development plan would have to be scrapped. The hundreds of millions of dollars in preliminary investment would be a total loss. I had noticed this issue during the negotiations. I didn't tell Jonathan. Because that night, when I stood outside the master bedroom with my suitcase, I had heard him tell Lena not to worry about anything. The intercom rang. I put down the document and went to open the door. Alexander Sterling was standing there, holding 2 bags. Dinner, he said, lifting the bags. The aroma of garlic and chili wafted out. It was a specialty from the Sichuan restaurant downstairs. Can you handle spicy food? Yes. He changed into slippers and came in. As he passed the living room, he saw the document on the coffee table and paused. You've read it? Yes. Any thoughts? I took the bags from him and went to the kitchen. As I transferred the food to plates, I said, Jonathan didn't do any geological surveys or check the urban planning before acquiring this land. He only looked at the location and the price and thought he got a bargain. Alexander leaned against the kitchen doorway, arms crossed. So that's why you didn't warn him. Why should I? I brought the mapo tofu to the table. The red oil was still bubbling. He's a smart man. He should be able to figure it out himself. Alexander chuckled. It was the first time I had ever seen him laugh out loud. Not a polite smile, but a genuine laugh of amusement. His eyes crinkled, and a hint of his canines showed. Catherine Beckwith, you're far more. I'll take that as a compliment. We sat down opposite each other and began to eat. The mapo tofu was so spicy it brought tears to my eyes, but I couldn't stop eating. Halfway through the meal, Alexander's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID, then turned the screen to show me. Jonathan Pierce. Should I answer? He asked me. I nodded, taking a bite of tofu drenched in red chili oil. Alexander pressed the answer button and put the call on speaker. Jonathan's voice came through the phone, hoarse as if it had been sanded down. Sterling. We need to talk. About what? You know Catherine Beckwith, right? You were classmates in grad school. Have you heard from her? Alexander glanced at me. I ate another piece of tofu and nodded at him. Yes, I have. The other end of the line went completely silent. Then I could hear Jonathan's heavy breathing. Where is she? Do you think I would tell you? Jonathan's voice suddenly rose. She's my fiancée. Is she? Alexander's voice was devoid of emotion. Then why did your fiancé walk out of your house in the middle of the night? Silence again. It was so long this time that I thought Jonathan had hung up. Then his voice came back, very low, as if crushed under a great weight. What did she say to you? She said, Alexander paused, she doesn't want you anymore. He ended the call, turned the phone over, and placed it face down on the table. Let's continue eating. I stared at the mapo tofu in my bowl. The red oil reflected the overhead light, sparkling. Alexander. Yes? Will he find this place? No. Alexander added another spoonful of mapo tofu to my bowl. And even if he did, he wouldn't have the guts to come in. Why not? He looked up and met my gaze. The warm yellow light from the dining table reflected in his eyes. Because this isn't the Pierce estate. Chapter 6, A New Identity. A week later, I had been staying at Alexander's penthouse for 7 full days. In those 7 days, I had deactivated all my social media and changed my SIM card. I slept until I woke up naturally, basked in the sun by the 28th floor window, read books, and drank tea. Alexander came for dinner every night, sometimes with takeout, sometimes cooking himself. His cooking skills were surprisingly good, especially his braised pork belly. On the 7th night, he brought something with him, a dark gray invitation with silver embossed lettering. The cover read, Charity Night. The host was a foundation under Sterling Holdings. The venue was the Grand Ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. The date was the following night. He placed the invitation on the coffee table. I picked it up and opened it. The guest list was printed with many familiar names. Jonathan Pierce's name was among them. Next to it, it said, +1. That one would undoubtedly be Lena Hayes. You arranged this? Alexander sat on the sofa, crossing his legs, as casually as if he were discussing something trivial. The charity gala is an annual event. I just added Jonathan to the invitation list this year. Why? I wanted to see. He looked at me. If you wanted him to see you. As Mrs. Sterling? Yes. I do, I said. He smiled. He took a deep blue velvet box from his suit pocket and placed it next to the invitation. Then wear this. I opened the box. Inside was a necklace. The pendant was a pear-shaped sapphire, surrounded by a cluster of small diamonds. It shimmered with a deep blue light, as if it held a piece of the night sky. Beneath the necklace was a matching pair of earrings. This is too expensive. The jewelry worn by Mrs. Sterling cannot be cheap. He stood up, took the necklace, and walked behind me. He gently placed the chain on my collarbone and fastened the clasp. His fingers brushed against the skin on the back of my neck. They were cool, but the spot he touched instantly grew warm. I'll pick you up at 7 tomorrow night. On the night of the charity gala, I wore a black velvet long dress. The sapphire necklace peeked out from my décolletage. My hair was swept up, and the sapphire earrings dangled from my ears. The person in the mirror looked unfamiliar. It wasn't just the makeup or the dress, it was the look in her eyes. Before, when I stood next to Jonathan, there was always a hint of caution, of trying to please, in my gaze. Before attending any event, I would repeatedly check if my attire was appropriate, if I would embarrass him in front of his business partners. When taking photos, I would cling to his arm, a standard smile on my face. Back then, I was Jonathan Pierce's fiancée. Now, I was Alexander Sterling's wife. Not an accessory, not a decoration, but an equal. At 7 o'clock sharp, Alexander arrived. He wore a black 3-piece suit, his deep blue tie perfectly complementing my sapphires. His hair was impeccably styled, revealing a broad forehead. He looked like he had stepped off the cover of a magazine. The moment he saw me, his gaze lingered. How do I look? I did a little twirl. Beautiful, he said. He extended his arm. I linked mine with his, and we walked into the elevator together. Our reflection appeared in the mirrored walls. He was half a head taller than me, and I leaned against his arm. The hem of my dress brushed against his trousers, just like in that photo from 3 years ago. The grand ballroom of the plaza was ablaze with brilliant lights. A red carpet was laid out at the entrance, flanked by reporters, their camera flashes going off incessantly. A staff member saw Alexander and immediately rushed over. "Mr. Sterling, this way, please. Your table is at the head of the room." The staffer's eyes fell on my face and faltered for a second. "My +1. Alexander's voice wasn't loud, but several nearby reporters turned their heads in unison. I felt their lenses swing towards us. "Your wife." The staff member's composure momentarily broke. "Mr. Sterling, you're married?" "Yes. A few days ago." Alexander wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me closer. "Please add my wife's name to the place card at our table." When we entered the ballroom, many people were already seated. Our table was in the center, adorned with flowers and place cards. Alexander's seat was in the middle. The place card next to his had just been handwritten, the ink not yet dry. "Mrs. Sterling." All eyes were on me. I could hear whispers from the surrounding tables. "Who is she? When did Alexander Sterling get married? I've never seen her before. Which family is she from? Wait, isn't that the woman who used to be with Jonathan Pierce?" "Yes, it is. Her name was Catherine something." I calmly sat down next to Alexander. He pulled out my chair for me, waited until I was seated, and then took his own seat. His movements were so natural that anyone could see it wasn't just gentlemanly manners, but a habit. There was another commotion at the entrance. Jonathan Pierce had arrived. He wore a gray suit, but his face was pale, and the dark circles under his eyes were visible even from a distance. Lena Hayes was clinging to his arm. She wore a champagne gold mermaid gown, a string of pearls around her neck. Her face was wreathed in smiles as she posed for the cameras. Then her gaze swept across the head table, past Alexander, and finally landed on me. Her smile froze. Jonathan noticed me too. He stopped in his tracks as if nailed to the floor. Across the ballroom, I watched his expression shift from shock to confusion, from confusion to anger, and from anger to a stunned disbelief I had never seen before. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Lena tugged at his arm. "Jonathan, our table is over there." Jonathan didn't move. He shook off Lena's hand and strode towards the head table. His steps were quick, the sound of his leather shoes on the marble floor echoing urgently. He stopped in front of me. "Catherine Beckwith." I looked up at him. "It's been a while, Mr. Pierce." "Mr. Pierce." Not Jonathan Pierce, but Mr. Pierce. His Adam's apple bobbed. "Where have you been these past few days? Why didn't you answer your phone? Why?" His gaze swept over the sapphire necklace on my neck, the hand Alexander had placed on the back of my chair, and finally settled on the handwritten place card on the table. "Mrs. Sterling." Those 2 words were like 3 daggers piercing his eyes. "You're married?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." "To whom?" Alexander stood up. He was half a head taller than Jonathan, looking down at him, his face expressionless. "To me." Jonathan's hands were clenched into fists, the knuckles white. "Catherine Beckwith, you broke off our engagement, disappeared without a word, and married another man? Are you making a fool of me?" His voice was low, but each word was squeezed through gritted teeth. "Making a fool of you?" I stood up and met his gaze. "Jonathan Pierce, you brought another woman into our home. Let her live in our bedroom, wear my slippers, use my vanity. And you think I'm the one making a fool of you?" Jonathan's face turned ashen. "Lena was just staying over." "Staying over? Does staying over include trying on wedding dresses?" He froze. "How did you know about the wedding dress?" "Lena posted it on social media," I said. The location tag was the bridal shop. The caption was "The fated day." You were standing behind her, and your face was reflected in the mirror. Jonathan's lips moved, but he couldn't say a word. Just then, Lena walked over. She clung to Jonathan's arm, her eyes darting between me and Alexander, then a smirk appeared on her face. "Catherine, congratulations. I didn't expect you to find a new man so quickly." She deliberately emphasized the words, "new man." I didn't look at her. I turned to Alexander. "Darling." When I said that word, I myself was taken aback for a moment. Alexander looked down at me, and something glinted in the depths of his eyes. "Yes? This Miss Hayes says I found a new man." I placed my hand in his. "What do you think?" Alexander took my hand, his thumb gently stroking the simple band on my ring finger. Then he looked up, his gaze passing over Lena and landing on Jonathan. "Mr. Pierce," his voice wasn't loud, but the entire ballroom seemed to fall silent. What you threw away is something I've spent 3 years trying to win. You think he's her new man? The color drained completely from Jonathan's face. He stared at me, his eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't decipher. Catherine. Mr. Pierce, Alexander cut him off. Tonight is a charity gala, not a place to reminisce. Your table is over there. He gestured with his chin to a corner of the ballroom. There was a table by the wall, in the far corner, with the worst view. It was a table Alexander had specially arranged. Jonathan didn't move. He stared at me for a long time, so long that the surrounding guests began to whisper. Then he lowered his head, turned, and walked away. Lena stumbled after him in her high heels, her train dragging ungracefully on the floor. They sat at the corner table. Lena's face was pale, her lips pressed into a thin line, the radiant smile from her arrival completely gone. Jonathan didn't look at her once after they sat down. His gaze cut across the entire ballroom, through the lights, through the mingling crowd, and landed squarely on me. Alexander handed me a glass of champagne. He leaned in slightly, his lips close to my ear. That was a good performance. It wasn't a performance, I said. His hand, holding the champagne glass, paused for a moment. I turned to look at him. The chandeliers of the ballroom cast a myriad of tiny lights in his eyes. Calling you darling, that wasn't a performance. Chapter 7, The Gala Skirmish. Halfway through the gala, Lena made her move. The charity auction had just begun. The first item was an antique pearl necklace. The MC stood on stage, passionately describing its provenance, an heirloom from a bygone era, passed through foreign lands, finally returning home. The starting bid was $20,000. Alexander raised his paddle once. $25,000. A lady at the next table raised it to $30,000. Alexander raised it again to $35,000. Just then, a sweet voice came from the corner. $50,000. It was Lena. She held her paddle high, her chin slightly lifted, a triumphant smile on her face. After raising her bid, she deliberately glanced towards the head table, her gaze lingering on my face. Her meaning was clear, this necklace was hers. The MC excitedly called out, $50,000 from Miss Hayes. Do I hear any other bids? Alexander was about to raise his paddle again. I placed a hand on his. Don't. He glanced at me. That necklace doesn't suit you, I said. My voice low enough for only a few nearby tables to hear. The value of pearls lies in their luster and uniformity. The pearls on that necklace are uneven in size and their luster is dull. It's not even worth $20,000. Let her have it. Lena's smile froze on her face. The MC cleared his throat awkwardly. $50,000, going once. Twice. Sold. To Miss Hayes, congratulations. Lena won the pearl necklace, but her expression was as if she had swallowed a fly. The next item up for auction was an antique diamond tennis bracelet. It was flawless, the stones catching the light like frozen springs. The starting bid was $100,000. This time, Lena didn't raise her paddle. Not because she didn't want to, but because she couldn't. $100,000 was not a small sum for her. And Jonathan had been staring at the head table since he sat down, not making eye contact with anyone, just swirling the wine in his glass and taking sips. Alexander raised his paddle. $200,000. The entire ballroom fell silent for a moment. From $100,000 to $200,000 in a single bid. This wasn't an auction, it was a show of force. No one else made a sound. When the MC brought down the gavel, his hand was trembling. The antique diamond tennis bracelet was brought to the head table. Alexander took it, held my left hand, and slipped it onto my wrist. The brilliant diamonds against my pale skin were stunning, as if a spring had solidified on my wrist. This one suits you better, he said. I felt the temperature of the gaze from the corner rise sharply. Jonathan was staring at me, not at my face, but at my wrist. At the diamond bracelet on my wrist. He remembered. He remembered I had told him about a diamond tennis bracelet my grandmother used to have. It was a top-quality piece, passed down through 3 generations, but eventually lost by my aunt. I had said that one day, when I was rich, I would buy one just like it. Not for its value, but to carry on my grandmother's memory. I had told Jonathan this story more than once. Each time, he would just say, "Okay, I get it. We'll go look for one sometime." That sometime never came. Now, that bracelet was on my wrist. Bought by Alexander. Jonathan suddenly stood up. His chair scraped backwards, making a harsh, grating sound. A few people at the surrounding tables turned to look. Jonathan. Lena grabbed his sleeve. He shook her off and strode to the front of the head table. Catherine, we need to talk. Alexander put down his wine glass and leaned forward slightly. Mr. Pierce, I'd appreciate it if you didn't interrupt my wife's dinner. This is between me and her. Jonathan ignored Alexander, his eyes, dead and cold, fixed on me. 5 minutes. I wiped my lips with a napkin and stood up. Fine. 5 minutes. Alexander glanced at me. I nodded back, signaling that it was okay. The hallway outside the ballroom was carpeted in thick plush, completely absorbing the sound of our footsteps. Crystal wall sconces cast a dim yellow light, creating a play of light and shadow on Jonathan's face. What do you want to talk about? I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Did you really marry him? The marriage certificate is in my purse. Want to see it? Jonathan's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. Why? Give me a reason. A reason? I tilted my head and looked at him. Jonathan, the night you brought Lena home, I stood outside the master bedroom and heard you tell her not to worry about anything. Is that reason enough for you? His pupils contracted. You were outside the door then? Yes. From beginning to end. I heard everything. You let her stay in our bedroom, use my closet, wear your shirt. And the next morning, when I told you I was leaving, all you said was be safe. The hallway was so quiet I could only hear the low hum of the central air conditioning. Jonathan, I gave you a chance, my voice was light, like a feather falling on the carpet. I asked you if there was anything you wanted to say to me. You said no. Even if you have something to say now, it's too late. As I turned to leave, he grabbed my wrist. His grip was so tight it felt like it would break my skin. Catherine, you can't do this to me. We were together for 2 years. You married another man in just 10 minutes? I looked down at the hand he was gripping, then looked up into his eyes. Jonathan, you let Lena move into our bedroom in 5 minutes. Compared to you, what I did was nothing. His fingers loosened, one by one. One more thing. I took my phone out of my purse, pulled up a picture, and held it up to him. That land you acquired in Southwood. The subway plans were officially released last week. You should take a look. Jonathan took the phone. The plan on the screen was clear. A red dotted line ran through the middle of the Southwood plot, marked Transportation Line 6, planned. The location of the subway station entrance was exactly where Pierce Industries had planned to build its main commercial complex. His hand started to shake. How do you have this? I was the one who negotiated that land deal, I said. During the negotiations, I obtained all the relevant documents, including the urban planning files. You never asked me a single question before signing the contract. Why didn't you tell me? Because the night I came home. I looked into his eyes, enunciating each word. You were in our bedroom with another woman. The color drained completely from Jonathan's face. He stumbled back a step, his shoulder hitting the wall with a dull thud. You did it on purpose. I didn't do anything on purpose. I took my phone back and put it in my purse. I just stopped cleaning up your messes. In the past 2 years, haven't I cleaned up enough of them for you? When you got drunk, I was the one who picked you up. When negotiations failed, I was the one who handled the fallout. I chose the presents for your parents' birthdays. I even wrote your sister's recommendation letter for her study abroad program. I smoothed out the sleeve he had wrinkled, the diamond bracelet he had just given me gleaming on my wrist. Jonathan, I'm not your mother, not your housekeeper, and certainly not a decorative vase in your mansion. The woman you wanted wasn't me. You wanted a butler to take care of everything for you, and a woman who was good at acting cute and worshipped you. Lena fills the latter role. I wish you both happiness. As I walked out of the hallway, I didn't stop. I heard something slam against the wall behind me. A dull, heavy sound. Probably a fist. Lena was standing at the corner of the hallway. Her face was pale, and she was still clutching the pearl necklace she had won for $50,000. The pearls dug into her fingers, leaving indentations. Catherine, you did this on purpose, didn't you? You just wanted to make him regret it. I stopped and turned to look at her. Whether he regrets it or not has nothing to do with me anymore. Don't pretend. Lena's voice grew shrill. You married a richer man, so you came back to stomp all over us, didn't you? Who do you think you are? Who do I think I am? I turned and walked towards her, step by step. Miss Hayes, the slippers you're wearing are mine. The dresser you're using is mine. The man you're crying over is someone I didn't want. She stumbled back a step under my advance. The house you're living in now was chosen by me for him. The bed you're sleeping in was chosen by me. The dinnerware you're using was carried back by me, piece by piece, from abroad. Even the homemade preserves in your fridge were made by me. I stood in front of her, looking down at her. I was wearing heels, half a head taller than her. You are using my things from head to toe. And you ask me who I think I am? Lena's lips trembled, speechless. I smiled and took the pearl necklace from her hand. She instinctively tried to snatch it back but froze under my gaze. I held the necklace up to the light. You bought this for $50,000? I wonder if Jonathan will let you expense it. Her face changed. He didn't give me the money. Lena bit her lip, tears welling in her eyes. I laughed out loud. I pressed the necklace back into her hand and patted her shoulder. Good for you. Treasure it. After all, you paid for it with your own money. As I walked back into the ballroom, there was still a smile on my face. Alexander saw me and raised an eyebrow. All settled? Yes. All settled. I returned to my seat, picked up my knife and fork, and continued cutting the steak on my plate. It had gone cold, but I didn't mind. Alexander. Yes? Thank you for the subway plans. He didn't say anything, just swapped the cold steak on my plate for a warm piece he had cut from his own. Chapter 8, The Business of Favors. 3 days after the charity gala, problems began to surface at Pierce Industries. The first was the official announcement of the Southwood subway plan. On the morning the news broke, Pierce Industries' stock price plummeted by 12%. Investors flooded Jonathan's phone lines, all with the same question. Didn't you check the plans before acquiring the land? Jonathan had no rebuttal. Because he really hadn't checked. He had trusted me too much. No, he was too used to me handling those things. In every previous project, I was the one who researched all the materials and confirmed every detail. All he had to do was sign his name and accept the accolades in the spotlight. This time, he signed, and then he lost me. The second blow came that afternoon. A key supplier for Pierce Industries suddenly announced the termination of their contract. Their official reason was a strategic adjustment, but Jonathan's secretary found out that a subsidiary of Sterling Holdings had signed an exclusive contract with this supplier the night before, at a price 15% higher than what Pierce Industries was paying. The third blow followed. A redevelopment project Pierce Industries was working on in the city was halted due to procedural irregularities in its environmental impact assessment. Jonathan himself had overseen the procedures for this project. Then came the fourth, the fifth, the sixth. In 3 days, nearly $400 million of Pierce Industries' market value evaporated. Jonathan's father, Warren Pierce, flew back from abroad. At a board meeting, in front of all the executives, he excoriated his son. You've brought the company to this state over a woman? Jonathan stood at the other end of the conference table, unable to say a word in his defense. Because all of this was indeed his fault. He hadn't considered the consequences when he brought Lena home. He hadn't considered the consequences when he kicked me out of the master bedroom. He hadn't considered the consequences when he watched me walk out the mansion gates with my suitcase. Now, the consequences had arrived. Each one precise and merciless, like a meticulously calculated series of attacks. And they were, in fact, meticulously calculated. In Alexander's study, there was a wall-sized whiteboard. It was covered with diagrams of Pierce Industries' shareholder structure, project distribution, supplier lists, and partners. Every connection was clearly marked, and every vulnerability had a corresponding takedown scenario. He had been preparing these scenarios for 3 years. 3 years ago, at a graduate school alumni gathering, Jonathan had tried to get me drunk. I wasn't drunk, but he didn't know that. He kept coming over with a wine glass, saying, "Catherine, you can really hold your liquor," and pouring me glass after glass. He wanted to humiliate me, to prove that this woman who had always gotten better grades than him was nothing special. It was Alexander who got me out of there. He walked me to the restroom entrance, handed me a bottle of mineral water, and then stood guard at the door, preventing anyone from entering. He didn't say a word that night. But from that day on, information about Pierce Industries began to appear on his whiteboard. You've been preparing since then? I stood at the entrance to the study, looking at the whiteboard. Alexander was sitting behind his desk, a red marker in his hand. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because back then, you were still in love with him. He put down the marker. I didn't want you to feel like I was forcing you to choose. I walked into the study and sat in the chair opposite him. On the whiteboard, Jonathan's name was circled in red. Numerous lines radiated from it, each ending with the word completed. How much longer? I asked. One last move. Alexander took a file from a drawer and pushed it in front of me. Pierce Industries Logistics Center project, in Northwood, is their last source of funding. If this project stalls, their capital will be gone in a month. I opened the file. Inside were copies of the Northwood Logistics Center's land use agreement and urban planning maps. Is there a problem with this land? No problem. Alexander leaned back in his chair. The land is good, the location is good, the procedures are all in order. On this project, Jonathan didn't make any mistakes. Then how do you take it down? We're not taking down the project. I looked up. The desk lamp reflected in Alexander's eyes, quiet and confident. I'm taking down his people. The next day, the project manager and the entire technical team for Pierce Industries' Northwood project resigned en masse. Jonathan offered them triple their salaries, but no one stayed. Because what Alexander had offered them wasn't just a salary, it was company stock. 5 days later, Jonathan was sitting alone in his office at the Pierce Industries building. Outside the window was the city's most brilliant skyline. His father had built this 3-story building 10 years ago. Jonathan's office was on the top floor. Standing by the window, he could see half the city, including the even taller Sterling Holdings Tower. His secretary knocked and came in, holding a document. Mr. Pierce, we've received a response from the banks. Jonathan didn't turn around. All 3 banks have rejected our loan extension application. Yes. The reason is. The secretary's voice grew softer. There is significant uncertainty in Pierce Industries' business operations. All 3 of them? Jonathan's hand was pressed against the window pane. The glass was cold, and the chill spread from his palm to his heart. There's one more thing. The secretary placed another document on the desk. We've received a buyout proposal from a foundation under Sterling Holdings. Jonathan spun around. A buyout of what? The Southwood District land and the Northwood Logistics Center shares held by Pierce Industries. The price? The secretary swallowed hard. The price is 60% of the market value. 60%. This wasn't a buyout, it was a shakedown. It was stepping on his neck and taking the money from his pockets. Jonathan picked up the proposal and read it from beginning to end. The terms were clear, each word filled with a condescending ease. No threats, no coercion, just a quiet statement. Your company is finished. And I am the only one who will take it off your hands. On the last page, the signature line was already signed. Alexander Sterling. The handwriting was sharp, the ink almost bleeding through the paper. Jonathan slammed the proposal on the desk. Tell him to go to hell. The secretary didn't move. Mr. Pierce, several of the board's shareholders held an emergency meeting this afternoon. They have agreed to accept the buyout proposal. Jonathan was stunned. What? The shareholders voted. 7 in favor, 2 against. Your father, Chairman Pierce, voted in favor. Warren Pierce voted in favor. His own father had agreed to sell the company to an outsider. Jonathan slumped into his chair. The chair was genuine leather, worn over many years, with an impression of his body on the seat. He had signed countless documents and made countless decisions in this chair. His word had always been final. Now, even this chair might no longer be his. The phone on his desk buzzed. It was a text from Lena. Jonathan, I found a limited edition Hermes bag. Can you buy it for me? Jonathan stared at the message for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. Not to Lena. To me. The phone rang while I was on the balcony of Alexander's penthouse, watering the flowers. An unsaved number appeared on the screen, but I knew it all too well. I pressed the answer button. Catherine. Jonathan's voice was hoarse, like a wooden board that had been sanded down repeatedly. You had him do this, didn't you? Do what? Alexander Sterling. He's trying to buy out Pierce Industries. It was all planned from the beginning. The Southwood land, the Northwood team, the banks, it was all planned. I put down the watering can and leaned against the balcony railing. Jonathan, you were the one who signed the deal for the Southwood land. You were the one who couldn't keep your Northwood team. The banks refused to lend you money because your company was failing. These were all the results of your own choices. The other end was silent for a long time. Those weren't my biggest mistakes, he said, his voice suddenly low. My biggest mistake was kicking you out of our bedroom that night. The evening breeze blew, carrying the scent of gardenias from the flower garden below. Jonathan, I said, your biggest mistake wasn't kicking me out of the bedroom. Then what was it? It was that you never once thought I was important. I hung up and blocked his number. Alexander was standing at the balcony door, holding 2 cups of tea. Was that him? Yes. What did he say? I took a cup. The tea was a pale gold, with a few jasmine petals floating in it. He said you planned everything. Alexander leaned against the doorframe and took a sip of his tea. He's right. Then what was it you were planning for? He looked at the sunset. The light cast a soft glow in his eyes. I was planning for you. Chapter 9, The Cruel Truth. Jonathan Pierce learned the truth on the day Pierce Industries was officially acquired. The signing ceremony was held in the same grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel, where the charity gala had been held, the same room where he had seen me wearing the sapphire necklace, sitting next to Alexander. Alexander had done it on purpose. He had booked the entire ballroom and had the staff arrange the tables and chairs in the exact same layout. Even the flowers on the tables were the same, white roses and carnations. When Jonathan walked in, he froze. He had realized. He looked at the place card at the head table. Next to Alexander Sterling was written Mrs. Sterling. It was exactly the same as that night. Only this time, he wasn't a guest in the corner, he was here to sign away his company. The shareholder representatives of Pierce Industries sat on one side of the signing table, and Alexander's legal team sat on the other. When Jonathan entered, everyone looked up, but no one stood. Not even Warren Pierce. The old man sat in a corner, his hands resting on his cane, his gaze fixed on the table, never once looking at his son. Jonathan signed his name on the documents. The sound of the pen nib scratching on the paper was light, like something being torn. After signing, he put down the pen. Where is Alexander Sterling? Alexander's lawyer looked up. Mr. Sterling will not be attending the signing ceremony. He asked me to pass on a message to you. What is it? He said thank you for saving him the trouble with the Southwood land. Jonathan's hands clenched into fists. Just then, the ballroom doors opened. I walked in. Not as Mrs. Sterling, but as myself, Catherine Beckwith. The moment Jonathan saw me, he shot to his feet as if electrocuted. Catherine. I didn't look at him. I walked to the signing table and placed a document in front of Warren Pierce. Mr. Chairman, this is the original geological survey report for the Southwood District. Before your son signed the contract, this report was in his office at Pierce Industries. Warren Pierce took the report, flipped through a few pages, and his face changed. Jonathan. The old man's voice wasn't loud, but it was clearly heard throughout the ballroom. Did you see this report? Jonathan was stunned. What report? The geological survey report. It clearly states that there is a planned subway line under this land, making it unsuitable for commercial development. This report should have been delivered to your office 3 months ago. The color drained from Jonathan's face. Impossible. I never received such a report. You did receive it, I said. All eyes turned to me. I personally placed the report in your office's tray. The date was March 12th. It was a Monday. You came back after your morning meeting. There were 7 documents for your approval in the tray, and this report was the 3rd one down. Jonathan's gaze faltered, as if he were desperately trying to recall that Monday morning 3 months ago. March 12th, he repeated. You left early that afternoon, I said. Lena called and said she wasn't feeling well, so you went to pick her up. You went shopping together, and that night, she posted on social media. The middle picture of the 9 she posted was of her throwing a coin into a wishing fountain. Jonathan's hands started to shake. You never went back to the office after that. Of those 7 documents, you only signed the top 2. The bottom 5, including that survey report, you never even looked at. The ballroom was so quiet that only the low hum of the air conditioning could be heard. Warren Pierce slammed his cane on the floor. Jonathan. Jonathan flinched. For a woman. You stopped even looking at your company's documents? Jonathan said nothing. He stared at me, his eyes filled with a complex mix of emotions. You knew the report was there, he said in a hoarse voice. You deliberately put it 3rd. You knew I wouldn't see it. Why didn't you warn me? I laughed. Jonathan, I was your fiancé, not your secretary. My looking at your documents was an act of love, not an obligation. If you take that love for granted, then you have no right to complain when the obligation is suddenly no longer fulfilled. Warren Pierce stood up. The old man's finger, pointing at Jonathan, was white with pressure. Did you hear that? This is your own damn fault. No one else's. The company has been in your hands for 5 years. What have you accomplished? Which project, which deal, didn't have Catherine supporting you from behind the scenes? Who the hell did you think you were? Jonathan's lips moved. But no sound came out. Warren Pierce walked out with his cane. As he passed me, he paused. Catherine, the old man's voice softened, the Pierces have let you down. No, Mr. Chairman, not at all, I said. It's all in the past. Warren Pierce nodded and continued walking. At the door, he turned and glanced at Jonathan. Jonathan, when your grandfather founded Pierce Industries, he had only $20 in his pocket. In 5 years, You've sold 3 generations of hard work to someone else. The door closed. The ballroom was left with Jonathan, me, and a few lawyers organizing documents. Jonathan leaned against the edge of the table, as if all his bones had been removed. Catherine. Yes? When did you start planning this? From the day you first gave Lena a ride in your passenger seat. His pupils contracted. He had probably forgotten that incident. But I hadn't. It was our first anniversary dinner. I had booked a restaurant, wore a new dress, and was waiting for him downstairs. His car pulled up in front of me. The passenger door opened, and Lena got out, flipping her hair. Lena needed a ride, so I brought her along, he had said, as casually as if commenting on the weather. I barely ate that night. Lena sat across from me, smiling innocently. Catherine, don't get the wrong idea. Jonathan and I are just friends. Jonathan had nodded along beside her. That was the first time I saw Lena in his passenger seat. It wasn't the last. Jonathan, I said, do you know that women never leave suddenly? Every departure is the result of an accumulation of disappointments. Why didn't you tell me? I did tell you. I looked into his eyes. I told you many times. When I sent you a message saying I couldn't come home early, you replied, I'm busy. When I told you not to let other people sit in the passenger seat, you said I was being petty. When I said the way Lena looked at you was strange, you said I was overthinking it. I took out my phone and pulled up our chat history from a year ago, holding the screen up to him. I've saved every single thing you said. Jonathan stared at the conversation on the screen, his eyes slowly turning red. Did you think I didn't know you changed your phone password to her birthday? Did you think I didn't know you bought 2 of everything as souvenirs from your business trips? Did you think I didn't know you went with her to pick out my engagement ring? Jonathan's head snapped up. How? How do I know? I put my phone away. The manager of the jewelry store is an old friend of mine. The receipt from your card payment had both your and Lena's names signed on it. Jonathan swayed. The fireworks on the day you proposed were beautiful, I said, my voice as flat as if I were telling someone else's story. But the man under those fireworks. It wasn't you anymore, even back then. I turned and walked out of the ballroom. Behind me, there was a dull thud. Jonathan had fallen to his knees. The sound of his knees hitting the marble floor was heavy, like a sack of cement dropped from a great height. I didn't look back. In the hallway, Alexander was leaning against the wall, waiting for me. He had changed into a casual suit, no tie, and was holding a cup of hot caramel macchiato. Finished? Yes. He handed me the macchiato. The warmth seeped through the paper cup into my palm. He's on his knees. I know. Alexander glanced at me. Are you upset? I took a sip of the macchiato. It was just the right amount of sweetness. No. I looked up at him. The hallway lights cast a soft, warm glow on his face, outlining his features. Alexander, I said, the one on his knees is Jonathan Pierce. The one standing is you. He was taken aback for a moment, then he smiled. Let's go. He held out his hand. I took it, our fingers intertwining. The door to the ballroom behind us was still open. The shadow of Jonathan kneeling on the floor was stretched long by the light, lying on the marble floor like a crack that would never heal. Chapter 10, The Abyss of Regret. Jonathan Pierce remained on his knees for a long time after I left. A security guard later had to help him up. When the head of security at the plaza reported this to Alexander over the phone, his voice was filled with a mixture of shock and awe. He said Jonathan had sat slumped against the wall for nearly 20 minutes, refusing to move, before security finally had to escort him out. Alexander hung up the phone and looked at me. He wants to see you. I was sitting on the sofa, flipping through a magazine. Without looking up, I replied, I'm not seeing him. 3 days later, Jonathan's mother, Eleanor Pierce, came to Alexander's office. Mrs. Pierce rarely made public appearances and barely participated in Pierce Industries board meetings. She wore a simple, elegant dress, and stood in the lobby of the Sterling Holdings building. She carried an Hermes bag, and her makeup was tasteful, but the lines around her eyes betrayed her age. When the call came from the front desk, Alexander and I were in his office, playing chess. Let her come up, I said. Alexander glanced at me. Are you sure? Yes. When Mrs. Pierce entered the office, the first person she saw was me, not Alexander. She paused at the doorway, her lips moving, unsure of how to address me. Miss Beckwith? Mrs. Sterling? Or Catherine? Finally, she said. Catherine. I stood up. Mrs. Pierce, please have a seat. She sat down, placing her bag on her lap and clasping her hands over it. Her posture was elegant, but the knuckles gripping the bag's handle were white. "Catherine, I'm not here about the company," she began. Her voice softer than I had expected. "I'm here for Jonathan." I said nothing. Jonathan hasn't left his room in 3 days. He hasn't eaten, hasn't had a sip of water, hasn't spoken. When I went in to check on him, he was sitting on the floor by his bed, clutching a photograph. Mrs. Pierce took a photo out of her bag and placed it on the coffee table. It was a picture of me and Jonathan, taken at the beach 2 years ago. He had me on his shoulders, and I was screaming in mock fear while he laughed like a fool. My tears had soaked the shoulder of his shirt. "He found this among the things you left behind," Mrs. Pierce said. "You didn't take it with you when you moved out." "Because I didn't need to." Mrs. Pierce's eyes turned red. "Catherine, I know Jonathan has wronged you. He was foolish, blind. He was bewitched by that Lena Hayes woman. But he knows now. He knows he was wrong." "Mrs. Pierce," I cut her off. "What does he know?" She was taken aback. "He knows he was wrong." "Wrong about what?" I looked into her eyes. Was he wrong to bring Lena home? Or was he wrong that he didn't find out about the survey report sooner? Was he wrong to kick me out of our bedroom? Or was he wrong to think I would never really leave? Mrs. Pierce couldn't answer. "He doesn't regret what he did," I said. "He just can't bear the price he has to pay for it." If Alexander hadn't acquired Pierce Industries, if the Southwood land deal hadn't fallen through, if he were still the high and mighty CEO of Pierce Industries, do you think he would have kneeled in that ballroom? Mrs. Pierce's lips trembled, and a tear finally rolled down her cheek. "But he's truly suffering now. That is the consequence he deserves." When Mrs. Pierce left, she stood at the door for a long time. She didn't plead anymore, just looked back at me one last time. Her gaze was a complex mix of regret, pity, and resignation. After the door closed, Alexander picked up a black piece from the chessboard and placed it on the board. "Checkmate." I looked down at the board. My white pieces were cornered. "You win. You let me win," he said, starting to put the pieces back into the box. "From move 3-7, you were deliberately trying to lose." I didn't deny it. A week later, Jonathan was discharged from the hospital. He had been hospitalized for 5 days for severe dehydration and a stomach ulcer. The consequences of not eating or drinking were more severe than he had imagined. In the end, it was Mrs. Pierce who had called an ambulance. On the day of his discharge, a photo was taken in front of the Pierce estate gates. In the photo, Jonathan wore a gray hoodie and sweatpants and a hat pulled down low. He was a size smaller, his cheekbones protruding. Behind him was the house I had once lived in for 2 years. The tulips in the flower bed by the gate had withered, leaving only bare stems. The photo was posted online with the headline, "Former Pierce CEO discharged, looking haggard and gaunt." Lena Hayes commented under the photo, "Jonathan, I'll always be here for you." 3 hours later, her comment was deleted by Jonathan. 2 hours after that, Lena posted on her own social media. "Some people don't cherish what they have until it's gone. Unfortunately, there are no second chances in this world." She probably thought Jonathan would see it. But Jonathan's social media account had already been deleted. On the day he deleted his account, he unfollowed everyone on his list, except for one. That account's profile picture was a white gardenia, and the bio read, "Catherine Beckwith." He couldn't unfollow her. Because I had blocked him long ago. 3 months later, Alexander and I had our wedding at the Sterling family estate. There was no media, no grand ceremony, just fewer than 50 guests. Alexander's grandmother sat in a wheelchair, pushed by a caregiver, smiling at us from beginning to end. After the ring exchange, the old woman held my hand, looking at it over and over. "Such a good girl, much prettier than in the photo." "Photo?" I asked. The old woman took a photo out of the side pocket of her wheelchair. It was the photo from the graduate school gala 3 years ago. I was in an evening gown by the window, and Alexander was standing behind me. We were standing very close. "This boy," the old woman chuckled. Her eyes crinkling, "he's had this photo on his nightstand for 3 years. I told him, if you like a girl, go after her. He said, I can't. She's with someone." I glanced at Alexander. He was talking to a guest, his ears slightly red. Towards the end of the wedding, a staff member brought over an envelope. "Mr. Sterling, someone left this at the gate." Alexander opened the envelope. Inside was a cashier's check and a note. The amount on the check was 3 times the acquisition price of Pierce Industries' Southwood District land. The memo line read, "Application to repurchase Southwood District at original price." The note had only one sentence, written in Jonathan's hand. "Catherine, I've bought back the company. Will you come back?" Alexander handed the note to me. I glanced at it, then folded it in half, and in half again, into a small square. How should we reply? Alexander asked. I placed the small square of paper on a candle stand on the table. The flame licked the edge of the paper, turning it black, until it became a pinch of ash. No reply. Alexander looked at me for 3 seconds, then held out his hand. Then let's go home. I took his hand. His warm, steady hand. As we left the Sterling estate, the sky had already darkened. The last of the sunset had faded from the horizon, and a deep blue night was creeping in from the east. A man was standing under a sycamore tree outside the gate. Gray hoodie and sweatpants, hat pulled down low. It was Jonathan. He was so thin. The oversized clothes hung on him like they were borrowed. He hadn't shaved in days, a dark stubble covered his jaw. When he saw me come out, he took a step forward. Alexander's hand tightened slightly around mine. Should I handle this? No. I let go of Alexander's hand and walked towards the sycamore tree. Jonathan's eyes lit up. Catherine. Jonathan. I stopped 3 steps away from him. I received the check. I don't want the Southwood land. He was stunned. I can pay any price. It's not about the money. I took something out of my pocket and handed it to him. He took it and opened it. It was our wedding invitation. My name and Alexander's were embossed in gold on the thick ivory cardstock. At the bottom was a single line of small print. To have and to hold, from this day forward. His hand, holding the invitation, was shaking. You invited me? Yes. The wedding was today. This is a souvenir for you, I said, my voice very calm. Jonathan, you used to say I was ruthless. Today, I showed you mercy. This invitation is the mercy I'm leaving you with. What mercy? The mercy of regret. He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot. Catherine, I was wrong. I was really wrong. Give me another chance. Just one. Jonathan. I cut him off. Do you know the biggest difference between you and Alexander? He was taken aback. When you kicked me out of our bedroom, you said, be safe, I said. When he let me live in that penthouse, he said, the keys are already yours. The evening wind blew, rustling the leaves of the sycamore tree. One pushed me out, the other welcomed me in. Which one do you think I would choose? Tears finally fell from Jonathan's eyes. He knelt on the ground, in front of me, under the sycamore tree. He clutched the ivory invitation, his knuckles white. Jonathan, now you've learned something, I looked down at him. Not everyone who leaves will come back. I turned and walked back to Alexander. He held out his arm, and I linked mine with his. As the car door closed, I heard a hoarse cry from behind me. Catherine. The sound was stretched long in the evening wind, like a wound that would never heal. I didn't look back. The car drove out of the tree-lined driveway of the Sterling estate and onto the main road. The city lights streamed past the car window, red, yellow, blue, white, like an endless firework display. Alexander was driving. His profile was beautifully outlined by the streetlights. Did you cry? No. He glanced at me, then reached out his right hand and covered mine, which was resting on my knee. You won't have to cry anymore. I leaned my head back against the seat and watched the city flow by outside the window. No, I said. I won't.